Hello, I'm Grandmaster Dragan Solak. I have been invited by my friends to show you a few beautiful endgames. They have started this great chess platform, Satranç 365. I hope that you will have chance to experience great things in the future, probably some nice educational chess videos, beautiful tournaments and many other things. Okay, so let's take a look at this endgame, Rook versus Bishop. I'm just going to scratch the surface, but of course this is a very deep endgame actually, especially if we add a few more pawns. I'm going to start from here. We all know that the Rook is generally a little bit better than the Bishop, but this endgame is actually drawn most of the time. The best defending method is to keep your king in the square, in the corner that is of opposite color. For example, if you have light square bishop, our king should be in the dark corner, and then we usually don't have too many problems. Actually, there is only one way how we can possibly lose the game, and that is, okay, so in this position, white cannot make any more progress actually. In this position, if black opens his bishop to any square on this long diagonal, white can maybe try to give some check, black goes back, and because of the stalemate, white cannot make some move like this. And if white tries to check from here, black can just move the king a little bit. Normally, there is this beautiful idea to attack the bishop and at the same time threaten with the checkmate, but actually, in that case, black has this beautiful check. White king has to move, and again we are back more or less to the initial position. Black can, for example, go to the corner with his king, and there's nothing that white can do to improve his position. There is one interesting option where black can actually lose the game, and that is this move. If black moves the bishop here, then white should check and then attack the bishop. Now, normally, when we did the same thing in this position, black had an option to check, but now, here, black cannot check anymore, and he's lost. When the bishop moves, there is the checkmate. Okay, so pretty much what you need to know if you're on the defending side is you should keep your king in the opposite color. There are a few more positions, like, for example, this one. Let's say you have a dark square bishop and you're near the dark corner. Then the best thing that you can do is to keep your king like this and control the critical square. For example, it can be f6 square with your bishop from the long diagonal. There's nothing, absolutely nothing that white can do to create any progress. If the white attacks your bishop now, you shouldn't go here. Maybe it can draw as well, but the best thing is just to stay on the long diagonal. We all know that white needs kings to be in the opposition if he wants to checkmate, but this square is simply not available for the white king. So white could try to do something like this or something like that, but there is never going to be a checkmate. And there is one important thing that you have to be careful about. If white checks from f7, black needs to be careful. Of course, you shouldn't go towards the corner. You should go to e8, and then there are no problems. In case you go to g8 though, now white can win this position. So this is one super important situation that you must remember. If your king is in the wrong corner, so you have dark square bishop and your king is in the dark corner trapped like this, then you always lose. It doesn't actually matter where your bishop is. You will always lose the game. And the winning method is simple. White will open the rook so it attacks your bishop. It doesn't matter. Bishop can be here. White will still open the rook and then threaten with this checkmate. In case you try to defend like this, rook c8 check, you cover. Now the situation is not same because white can make a simple move with his rook and black is in Zugzwang. Here it would be a stalemate, but right now black has to move his king, and after rook takes f8, he loses. Okay. So this is one important position that you have to know. But of course, black shouldn't keep his bishop on b2 or c3 or some square like this. It's much better to try to hide his bishop on a square like g1 so that white cannot now open the rook like this and at the same time attack the bishop. So let's say black bishop is on g1. What will white do now? Well, we can attack the bishop like this, and when the bishop moves, we attack the bishop one more time. Bishop should move here or here. Let's say here, that's a nice square. And we come to this key square, g2. Now, we all know what happens if the bishop moves to some square like this. white will attack the bishop, then checkmate from c8. And we know by now that this doesn't help because of the tempo move. So once our rook comes to g2, black simply has no square for the bishop. If the bishop moves to h4 or f4, there is a very beautiful check by king and we win the bishop. Same thing happens if the bishop goes to the other side and black is simply lost. In my experience, while working with the kids, I can only say that the best chance for black is to play bishop d6 here, hoping that white would be a little bit confused, because now, after rook d2, bishop e7, rook e2, black can go king f8. Now that would be great for black. But after rook d2, bishop e7, that's a little bit original position. White has a way to win. It is this. We play rook a2, rook c2 would be same, and we want to checkmate on a8. Normally, if black bishop is not on e7, black would be able to run with his king, but right now he cannot do this because he loses after rook e8. And that's pretty much all you have to know about the position rook versus bishop. If you are in correct corner, black can easily make a draw, but in case your king is trapped in the wrong corner, same color of your bishop, then you lose the game. Now let's try to see some examples which are a little bit more complex than this. We'll give white one pawn. So if white has this h pawn and the bishop is the same color as the corner square, white can win the game quite easily. And let's put the king to h6, it doesn't matter because the winning method is always same and it's easy. We can just push our pawn all the way to h5, then bring our rook to g6. There's nothing black can do to stop this. And then we come to this position. I have actually seen many strong players, quite strong players, rated 2300 and even above, who have problems now to win this position once they face it in the real game. And the winning method is actually quite easy. So what is the problem here? We could come with our king to f7. And this position, as we know, without this pawn would be an easy win. But with this pawn, somehow white doesn't have an easy method. For example, we would like to attack the bishop, and after this move, attack one more time, and then check, and then some Zugzwang, and we win. But when the pawn is on h5, we cannot do that. We attack the bishop runs away, there is no checkmate. So the point is that we have to somehow get rid of this pawn. And we can do it in a quite easy way. So in a position like this, we should push the pawn to h6. And now we have a very simple idea. We want to bring our king to h5, then open the rook and check, then come with our king to g6, and this wins quite easily. So in this situation, when we push the pawn, black cannot let us go with our king to h5. He has to play bishop d2 and attack the pawn. And now we come to this very critical position where white players usually, even I have seen some masters, they try to play like this, and okay, usually they win the position in some way, but there is a quite simple win here. White should go rook g7 check. Black has to take the pawn. Well, there is a nasty trick here. Black would try to go king h8 and after king g6 take the pawn. But unfortunately for him, black doesn't take that. White doesn't take. That would be a stalemate. White checks and then takes with the rook. So we said the position was like this. White pushes the pawn. Black has to attack it to prevent this idea. And now white gives a check. Black has to take the pawn and white returns to g6. That's a very nice check. Now, if black goes king h5, after rook g2, the bishop is under attack. There is no way to prevent this check from h2. Maximum black can do is this, but after this, we just make a tempo move and black has to part with his bishop. So we go back to this position. Bishop is here. We push the pawn. Black has to attack it. We check. Black has to take the pawn. Another check. And now instead of this position, black decides to go back to h7. Now, if black only has one move, he will play bishop c3 and it will be a famous drawn position. But it's our turn and we go king f6. Black cannot stop king f7. And after that, we have the position that we already analyzed, where we want to win the bishop. He will have to somehow hide here if he manages, and then we will just chase the bishop. Now you must try to turn the chessboard in your head, but the logic is same. Bishop is under attack, has to move somewhere. For example, here we attack the bishop. Once it moves again, check, covers, a tempo move. Black has to go to the corner. We take the bishop, and this is the checkmate. I hope it was enjoyable for you, and hopefully we will create a few more videos in the future.